At Fluid MotorUnion, we've always had a soft spot for Alpina. The less popular of the factory BMW tuners has been making production cars for as long as the M Motorsports division, but their cars have been seemingly underappreciated by at least the US Beamer enthusiasts. So when a very discerning customer reached out to us about what we would build if you loved the E60, but the M5 was just too much, we knew the answer: the Alpina B5. The US domestic market only got a small taste of Alpina with a few official vehicles: the Z8-based Alpina Roadster, the E65 B7, and more recently the F06 B6 and F01 and G11 versions of the 7 Series were all available for sale, and a lucky few even passed through the doors of our service shop here in Naperville. While in the European market, they seemingly had an Alpina for each chassis designation. The plan of making things as straightforward as possible, the donor car that was chosen was a 2004 545 manual that came with a 4.4-liter N62 V8 engine that made 345 horsepower in factory trim. This car lived a good long life, but due to some unfortunate but all too common engine issues, was sitting gathering dust for quite a while. Now, as I previously stated, the only Alpina available for sale around the same time was not an E60 chassis, but rather the 7 Series E65 B7. This car came with a very similar 4.4-liter engine, but it instead was force-fed air via a supercharger instead of just naturally aspirated. In order for this vehicle to be considered an authentic tribute, the Alpina-specific engine, transmission, and differential would need to be part of this build. As you could probably tell, the engine and transmission removals are relatively straightforward for us. But the rear differential required a bit more care to attention. Now, since the differential removal grants easier access to the rear subframe components, now is the ideal time for a refresh. Anytime you're dealing with a donor car with some miles, things like subframe bushings, suspension components, as well as brake lines are best replaced when everything is out of the way. With the rear end taken care of, we turned our attention to the engine. Now, the N62 has its fair share of issues, so we were planning on taking it apart to deal with some things like carbon secondary air passages and valve stem seals. However, upon disassembly, we found another common issue: galling on one of the cylinder walls of the alusil. In the past, this sort of damage would have been a death sentence, as retreating the engine often costs more than the value of the car. This is especially critical with the Alpina engine block, as it's specific to this supercharged engine, meaning if we were to need a new engine block for this build, it most likely wouldn't be happening. It's difficult to say why this cylinder failed, but this is common enough on N62s that we weren't surprised. It will often manifest itself as a knocking noise from the piston slapping on the cylinder wall. Luckily, the aftermarket has developed some cost-effective options for fixing the engine damage of this nature. We used a reputable company by the name of Millennium Technologies. Aside from the one cylinder with damage, all of the other bearings actually looked pretty good, which is kind of surprising for a BMW. Regardless, we replaced the damaged piston and got a new set of performance-coated bearings for the engine, and all new piston rings. Now, we're going to be slightly increasing the ring gap over stock, as we plan to push a little more power than the factory rated 507 horsepower. As you can imagine, waiting for bearings and Alpina-specific boost piston rings from Germany during the coronavirus took an incredible amount of patience. So, while we were waiting, we thought we could use the extra time to do a more complete job of the paint and bodywork. So we took the liberty of completely disassembling the vehicle so that the door jambs and engine bay could be sprayed in the chosen color, Alpina Weiss Blue 2. We knew this color choice would only further enhance the authenticity of this tribute build. Since the panels were off for the bodywork, the customer opted to completely sound dead in the interior of the vehicle. The customer was mostly concerned with road noise and sound isolation, but I'm sure it's going to help boost the audio quality as well. Other Alpina goodies included B5 Spec brakes painted in Alpina Weiss Blue as well, and an original Alpina B5 instrument cluster and front spoiler sourced from Europe. What comes next for the Alpina tribute build? With the engine installation out of the way, we now begin the challenging issue of getting the engine computer and transmission computer to communicate with the rest of the car. The final components of the drivetrain to tackle will be other items like drive shaft length and supercharger placement. So while it might seem like we're pretty close to wrapping up, there's still some unknown variables that may prove to be quite difficult. And as you know, with any build we've done, it wouldn't be a fluid MotorUnion car unless the exhaust was over the top. So expect power upgrades aided by a full-length tubular stainless steel header into a system that sounds classy yet aggressive. To stay tuned in for more of our Alpina tribute build, hit the subscribe button at the bottom. And if you like the build, go ahead and hit like or leave a comment. If you've got any questions about making your own Alpina, go ahead and hit us up at fluidmotorunion@gmail.com and we'll be sure to help you out. Thanks a lot.